Hello, Irish fans, and welcome to Dome and Domer, the oldest Notre Dame football podcast on the planet.
Not the oldest Notre Dame podcasters. Is that what you're saying?
Informative, not
Probably
the most,
that too.
but we are the oldest. So
Well, I don't know about that. Priester's in the 80s, isn't he?
Yeah.
it's all nothing. We've seen it all. This is just, another blip in the road.
Indeed.
So I guess just first off, because I just am kind of intrigued. Ed, since you know Pete Sampson, do you think he's in any hot water with tampering with Sam Hartman at all? Did you see that at all? Somebody tried to call him out on Twitter saying that, hey, Notre Dame is tampering, with Pete's announcement that how could he know that Hartman is considering Notre Dame if he hasn't even entered the portal yet? Because they put the timing of Pete's tweet about Portman going into the portal and is expected to land at Notre Dame prior to Hartman actually announcing.
Well, I thought that was Pete. That was Pete Thamel, or is that how you say his name? Pete Thamel that had it first.
Maybe Pete Sampson was just retweeting that, is what it was.
I think he was.
This is why I'm not on Twitter.
Well, you know what? The thing is about, if I've learned anything about this stuff, is that, it's just like, all this stuff is back channel, right? All these guys have quarterback coaches who know this person, all this stuff is, none of it is really officially tampering, because all the communication is through strength and conditioning coaches that they had in high school, and through, everybody knows somebody and they get messages back and forth to each other. I think that's the way all this stuff works. And listen, I mean, Sam Hartman, at the beginning of the year said he wasn't going back. This was his last year at Wake Forest, and that he was either going to enter the draft or play someplace else. So it's not like some news that, he was going to look for someplace else to play. So, I mean, I can't imagine that there hasn't been some sort of behind the scenes discussions, and I don't know why it would be considered tampering. I mean, the guy's just kind of looking out for his interests, and, it's not like he signed with an agent or something like that. I mean, this stuff's going on all the time. So certainly it's going on with high school kids. So I don't know why it wouldn't go on with a college senior.
Yeah, it is a little bit crazy. I saw an interview with Logan Diggs yesterday or the day before after practice, and they were interviewing him. And one of the questions they asked is, what have you learned, so far being at this point prior to the game, over the last couple of weeks of practice? And I thought it was interesting what he said, because he said it was a real challenge to kind of keep everybody together with all the talk of transfers and all this kind of stuff going on. It just goes to show how much a distraction it is with this bowl game. But I personally, I'm kind of disappointed with what we're dealing with now, because the bowl game is kind of like now even worse in terms of interest level and all that, now that all this crap's going on.
It really is. I read an article probably on The Athletic that talked about how the NCAA is looking at realigning its calendar, because having the transfer date and the early signing date and the bowl games, everything just crammed all into this small area, is really creating a lot of problems for a lot of coaches, even like what we would consider to be like the high-powered ones. I think just having all of these things happening at once, really, as you said, it distracts, and it really does erode at the interest of games that I'm not really sure, with the advent of the 12-team playoff, these games are on borrowed time anyway, because are people really going to really care about a Gator Bowl when, like, we'd be in the midst of the playoffs right now? So I think
I know nobody cares, but all these kids are. I know nobody cares, but supposedly all these kids are having final exams too.
Oh, allegedly, yes.
Right.
Totally. Allegedly. But I don't know. I think the sport overall really has to do a major reset. And I know there have been things like conference realignments and moves to the playoffs and media rights contracts expiring and stuff like that. I think all of this stuff coming together, there really has to be a hard reset. I think they need to have a calendar that makes sense. They need to decide whether these bowl games make sense given the playoff. And I think they need to decide how teams are going to be aligned to make sure that they keep a product that's interesting to people, because I think the regular season in basketball has been hurt by the expansion of the playoffs and the over focus on March Madness. Are we going to start seeing that? I mean, I know there's fewer games, but are we going to start seeing that in college football maybe?
That's a good point. All right, well, let's jump over to the game. And I'm kind of curious, do you think this is a one game opportunity for Tyler Buchner, or do you think that's just has very little impact on the decision in August next year? I mean, in other words,
I don't think it has an impact, but I mean, I love games like this, to tell you the truth, because you get to see players that are really getting their first chance to shine. I think we'll see a little of Jalen Sneed. I think we'll see, we'll see a little bit more of the tight ends besides Michael Mayer. We'll see, see if Jordan Botelho can have an impact on the game. I kind of like games like this. We'll see if the receivers and Buchner have sort of taken a step, forward or backward. I mean, it's an interesting game to me, but I guess that's because I'm a Notre Dame fan, and this kind of things are interesting to me. But no, I don't think it's like a make or break game for Tyler Buchner, but certainly if he plays well, I think, listen, if Sam Hartman comes to Notre Dame, he's coming because he's going to be the starting quarterback next year. They could talk all they want about, how there's a spring competition or how there's a fall competition, but it's sort of like the competition is going to be for who's his primary backup, Minchie or Angeli or Buchner, if they're all three still around. But Tyler Buchner has played very little football for Notre Dame, so this is a chance for him to see how good of a decision maker. I mean, to me, this would not be I think Notre Dame would be a touchdown favorite if not for, Tyler Buchner's mismatch just in terms of sort of ability and talent and experience with Spencer Rattler. I mean, really the only thing South Carolina has going for it in some degrees is they're superior, at least on paper, going into the game at the quarterback position. I mean, they are really, down starters at just about every position because of transfers, because of injuries, because of the portal, et cetera. So, I think Notre Dame's depth should win this football game, especially the fact that its offensive line is intact. It has all its running backs. But I think it'll be an interesting game just because, Rattler has had a fantastic last month of the season, and he's a very, very good quarterback. I mean, I think wasn't he like 1 or 2 coming out of high school? I mean, he's talented as hell. So
talented kid. And he's played well this year. He's definitely played much better than he has in the previous couple of years. So he's had a hell of a year. Coffee, I think what's going to be interesting is my gut instinct is you're not going to want to run Tyler Buchner 4 and 5 times in the first couple series. And so you're almost forcing him to do something that he's been kind of a little bit uncomfortable with in those first couple of games. And so I do think there's going to be it'll be interesting to see if in fact the game truly did slow down for him because he spent time up in the box watching the whole entire field at the time. That'll be interesting. I don't know. I think you're going to see some runs. I don't think you're not going to see any at all. I think he's going to have to run it a couple times, but I do think you're going to see him throwing it maybe a little bit sooner than we think.
I'd like to see, though, a little bit more running overall. Because if you look at the stats, South Carolina didn't have the world's best run defense, and now they're down like one of their best players who is getting ready for the NFL draft. I think they lost another one to injury. I think this is an opportunity, since Notre Dame has a relatively inexperienced quarterback, and I realize he was QB1 up through when he got hurt against Marshall, but I think a run-focused offense with some play action passing in there would be a great recipe for this game for Notre Dame, because you're down your primary receiver in Michael Mayer. You've got a more mobile but less accurate quarterback who hasn't played since game 2, and you've got a stable of outstanding running backs and an offensive line that is going to be coming in pretty much at full strength. So my money would be on a run-focused offense in the interest of actually getting points up on the board and taking less pressure off the defense.
I think you're right about that. That wouldn't make sense. Ed, do you think we're going to see Angeli at all? Do you think that's guaranteed we'll see
I'd
him
love
at
to
least?
see him.
Yeah.
Oh, I definitely think we will, for a couple of reasons. I mean, I think that they want to give him a little hope. And the fact of the matter is that he's kind of worked hard all year. And he should be rewarded a little bit. I mean, Buckner's kind of been practicing for, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe. And it wouldn't surprise me if Angeli has performed as well, or maybe even better than Buckner leading up to this game. Just because he's been running plays, he's been running the offense, he's been doing stuff while Buckner's been watching. It's just different watching and doing. So yeah, I think they'll definitely throw him in there, especially if Buckner gets off to a rough start, or but yeah, no, he'll get at least a few series, whether or not the game is close, I think.
Yeah. Again, I think with just being where bowl games are now and the interest level and all that kind of stuff, it'd almost be kind of crazy not to play him at all.
Right.
Even though I think we had the same exact conversation last year, Coffee, and you were adamant about getting Buckner in the game, and he didn't take a single snap.
Yeah. True.
And we still had a football game, but and we were up 28-7 at one point, still didn't see a snap. So I don't know. It's got to be interesting to see how all that plays out.
Well, I think I like the fact that we have a coaching staff with a year under its belt. Last year, the bowl game, Marcus Freeman is having to do like 50 million things, one of which was actually coach a game. This bowl season, I think there's a lot less pressure. There are a lot fewer responsibilities, because you're not a brand new coach with a million people in the media wanting to get 10 minutes of your time. Now we can actually focus on the game. Yeah, I know there was some recruiting stuff going on too, but this is such a much more calm atmosphere. And I'll be interested to see what a Marcus Freeman coach team looks like with 3 or 4 weeks to prepare and see what we get, because I think this will show us maybe what kind of, just in general, I'm not saying in specific, maybe this will give us a feel for what a Marcus Freeman bowl team will be like. I mean, we knew what the Brian Kelly bowl teams looked like, and I'm hoping this looks better than those did.
Well, it will be interesting. Ed, I have to ask this because I'm just kind of curious. Do you think there's much? I mean, I know that a lot of people are saying if you thought NIL affected the signing this year, wait till next year. Like, it is going to be absolutely out of control. But, realistically, we lost 2 kids, one of them at the running back position, where we have arguably overloaded talent there at the moment. But, losing Peyton Bowen at the last second would have been our only 5-star get. Do you think there's any concern there that that's going to be an issue coming up again for us that'll be tough to overcome next year in terms of the NIL and how it affects things?
I mean, I think it's going to always be an issue with, when you're in competition for those, top 15, 20, 30 players in the country. Many of them are going to be swayed by that, especially when some of the, amounts are rolling around. I mean, I think Notre Dame is positioning itself for the longer term, hopefully. I mean, because I think that at some point there's going to have to be some rules and some enforcement actions perhaps around what is a legitimate NIL program and what is just pay for play.
Exactly.
Because they're 2 different things, right? So, I don't know. Like, I know a little bit about Charlie Baker. I mean, I think the best thing, if there's going to be any sort of reforms and improvements in sort of the toothless sort of nonsense that we've seen out of the NCAA for quite a while, especially under Mark Emmert, maybe leadership at the top can sort of change this. I mean, I can't imagine a bigger issue that's coming on his plate than basically sort of, retaining this sort of, thinly veiled sort of mirage of, amateur athletics. I mean, college football is really turning into, Major League Baseball, basically.
Exactly.
So I think that, Notre Dame has to sort of, compete in that arena, without going overboard, so that they're prepared if they've been doing it sort of in a smart way. If the rules sort of come down and sort of the pay for play aspect is either, is sort of curbed a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think the issue for Notre Dame and 5 stars is always going to be, is it a player who, NIL is a secondary or third or fourth consideration, right?
Yeah, I think
in other words, they see a fit at Notre Dame, and that's the most important thing for them. And I think we should just, sort of understand that, 5 stars that come to Notre Dame, it's more likely that they're going to be offensive linemen than skill position guys. And it's going to be a real victory if we pull one off. And even then, I would not be surprised if, there's a 2 or 3 guys that Notre Dame got in this class that are drafted well above, 10 of the 5 stars.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, one thing I was thinking about, I was at my buddy's bar the other day. He and I were talking about, NIL and all that. And he said, well, Guinness is like the national beer of Notre Dame, or whatever relationship that they have established. What is to stop Guinness from saying, hey, by the way, we have this arrangement with Notre Dame. Notre Dame's starting quarterback is going to be in a national commercial every fall, and we are going to compensate them accordingly. That would be something that Notre Dame wouldn't be paying the money. It wouldn't be based on paper play or whatever that, but it would say the starting quarterback will be in this commercial and will get paid for it. I mean, that to me is how NIL is supposed to work. It's supposed to be where we are going to use your name, image, or likeness for to generate sales or in marketing or stuff like that. Notre Dame has a lot of corporate partners that they never stop crowing about, our partnerships with Xerox and whoever. Why can't those partners utilize Notre Dame players, not only for football, for basketball, hockey,
I don't think there's
soccer, all kinds of stuff.
I don't think there's any way in the world that Notre Dame will permit a student athlete to, while they're a student athlete at Notre Dame, to advertise for alcohol, tobacco, or firearms, regardless of how old they are, regardless of what position they play, regardless of the fact that it's Guinness, which is kind of, Notre Dame's sort of beer of choice, et cetera, et cetera. It's just not going to happen.
That's kind of hypocritical, though, isn't it? I mean, they enter the agreement with Guinness. That's kind of hypocritical then. If it's bad to help alcohol advertise,
Well,
maybe 21-year-olds do it.
It's different having a 60-year-old ex-quarterback advertise for Notre Dame than a 22-year-old current quarterback for Notre Dame. Those are 2 very different things.
As long as but I mean, you raise a good point that it would the kid would, whoever it was, would have to be of legal drinking age. But I mean, if they're over 21 years old, I mean, who cares?
I think Notre Dame would care because they're already sensitive to drinking on campus, and the fact of the matter is, it's a student. It's regardless of whether they're 22 or 23. I just think there's no way that would happen. I mean, I agree with the concept that maybe they do an ad for something else, a national ad, whether it's for Comcast or Coca-Cola or Under Armour or NBC or one of the other big, corporate partners. But I find it very hard to believe that they would ever do that. Even with a relatively benign alcohol brand like Guinness.
And I completely understand what you're saying, and I also understand where you're coming from. But if Notre Dame did that, that would be yet another, to me at least, yet another example of them putting their own hurdles in their own way to make things more difficult than they need to be. So I, as a Notre Dame alum and fan, would be extremely frustrated by that.
Well, somehow we're going to have to compete with all this. I mean, there's got to be a way to where we're close enough to where it's not an easy decision to not go to Notre Dame because I'm a 5-star. Every single deal everywhere else is way better. So they're going to have to somehow come to grips with that. But, could be that, like you say, Ed, the 4 stars. I mean, look, I think the good news is for Notre Dame, the number of 4 stars that we've signed over the last 2 years is far greater than we've done in the previous. There's been no 2 years put together back to back of 80% 4 stars since I can't remember the last time that happened. It would have to be Holtz, I would think.
The blue chip index, I think is what they call it. They say that breaking down your class by like there's overall points, but then there's depth, there's quality. And I think the article I read called it the blue chip index. And as you said, it's been above 80% the last 2 classes in a row, which hasn't happened in quite a long time.
Just awesome. That's great stuff.
Before we get off the NIL topic, I just want to say I think it's a much bigger issue for Notre Dame when they lose a guy like this, Fisk from Western Michigan, than it is when they lose a Peyton Bowen. I mean, Peyton Bowen, he's 2 hours away from Oklahoma. He's got a girlfriend or friends that go there. He's an 18-year-old kid, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's a pretty much of that'd be a great, that'd be an unusual pickup for Notre Dame, regardless. But this kid from Western Michigan, who's from Michigan City, who can really enhance his draft stock at, a Power 5 school, that obviously is an NIL issue that they fell short on. And, I don't know if that's because, somebody from Florida State, just is going to write a check, or I don't know how that goes down. But to me, especially when you look at sort of the opportunity that Notre Dame has on the defensive line next year, graduating Foskey, losing the twins, et cetera. So that one to me hurts more than losing Peyton Bowen.
True, but I agree with you. It's a direct NIL issue, which is where someone's going to get paid to sign on the dotted line, which I think we all agree Notre Dame's probably never going to get into, whether for good or ill, it's not going to happen. But one possible complication there, let's say he comes in, he gets like $250,000, $300,000 or whatever, and he craps out and he doesn't start and he's not playing as well as the guy next to him who's not getting paid as much. That's a possible issue. I mean, I think Kane Madden coming in, getting all these accolades, and then I don't want to say stinking up the joint, but he didn't play nearly as well as people were hoping. This kid's still going to have to make a jump up from the MAC up to ACC level football, which is not an insignificant jump, at least to me. So,
but don't you think those are chances that you can take? And my understanding is that Notre Dame's sort of general philosophy when it comes to NIL, and they're not the only school doing this, is to really spread the wealth. In other words, there's some remuneration for everyone on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that you make a good point that, we're going to hear stories about, some teams having some real chemistry issues because one guy's getting $800,000 and another guy's getting $150,000 because that was set up before the season started, and the guy that's getting $150,000 is a potential All-American. The guy that's $800,000 is his ass is on the bench because he's not performing. So I think that is an issue. But Notre Dame is so selective with these transfers, and so selective. They're mostly graduate transfers to date, and their specific needs. That I just think that this is a deal that they couldn't close because of NIL, and that's a shortcoming, because I don't think it shouldn't have taken $1 million to get this guy to pick Notre Dame over Florida State.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I mean, I think this is they better get their hands on this real quick, because this could spin out of control if they kick this can down the road. But all right, let's do predictions. Coffee, what do you think?
This game, at least to me, is so difficult to predict, just with all the opt-outs and stuff. In our contest, I picked 28-27. I've kind of rethought that. I'm going to go with 21-17 Notre Dame wins. Okay. I think this is going to be a defensive struggle, for lack of a better phrase.
Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think Notre Dame's going to run the ball pretty well, and I think it's going to be a flip of sort of the conventional wisdom. I think the offense is going to play pretty well. I think the defense is going to struggle. So I think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. But I think Notre Dame's going to win 38-27.
Yeah, I was closer to that. I'm thinking 35-30 Notre Dame with us rushing for probably 250 yards. Yeah, I totally agree.
Let's see that.
I just think that they're not going to be able to hold us. That would be a bad sign if, we go the first 2 series, 3 and out, trying to run the football. But I just think they're going to have a tough time with our running backs, and that should allow us to control the game. But I do think there's going to be a bunch of points on the board. But yeah, it's tough. I'll feel much better, I think, when the ball is kicked off. But last night was pretty cool. It was a hell of a game, North Carolina, and that was a fun one to watch. That kid's a real talent. He's a hell of a quarterback. He's going to be a good one. And so I think once the players get on the field, it'll be a football game. There's going to be all that goes by the wayside. And, you get, as Mike Tyson used to always say, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth. So I think they'll get into it. I think it'll be a lot of fun watching the game.
Well, I think these games are important because, they're also kind of portal management games, right? They allow you to play some guys who maybe got frustrated this year, who didn't see as much of the field as they thought. You can work them into the mix, and, they get a little bit of taste of actually playing for Notre Dame. And it kind of reminds them of why they made the decision they did in the first place. So I'm hopeful that we see a little bit of that. We mentioned some of those guys, Merriweather, Sneed, Prince Colley continuing to play. You'll see, it sounds like Brandon Joseph is going to be, potentially sort of hobbled. So we'll see some people, we'll see Mickey or, perhaps play a little bit better or get some confidence. So it's like anything else. You want to win going into the spring, right? You want to walk off the field for the last time this year feeling better about yourselves. And the fact of the matter is they didn't play well against Southern Cal, and hopefully that's kind of sticking in their craw a little bit, especially the offensive line, because at least on paper, it looks like a game where they should push people around.
Totally, 100%. All right, good deal. We'll leave it there. You've been listening to Dome and Domer, an online conversation about Notre Dame sports from a fan's perspective. For Ed Jordanek, Mike Coffey, I'm Mike Brammer. Thanks for listening. Cool. Thanks, Mike. All right, awesome. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Happy New Year,
Enjoy the game
guys.
tomorrow.
What's that?
Enjoy.